I thought that's what he was in.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the funding committee meeting. For a couple of us, this is our second meeting back to back. Well, with a little 15-minute break in between. So my name is Mark Moore. I work with Homebase. I'm gonna try my best to look at people in the room and look at Zoom. Can folks on Zoom hear us okay? A thumbs up or something in the chat saying the sound quality is fine would be helpful. And then I'm also going to ask Alex, who is from Homebase, and she is tuning in via Zoom. Alex, do you mind unmuting real quick and saying a couple of things to make sure we can hear people on Zoom?
Yes. Can you all hear me? We can hear you, Mark, for the most part.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you. Thanks, Alex.
Great.
So Alex, is it okay if I pass it over to you for the intro, or do you want me to?
Yes. Hold on. I'm just navigating between a couple of screens. Okay. You all can see the screen okay? Is that big enough? And
Yep.
yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's kind of strange. I think this is my first hybrid meeting, but it's so good to see some of you there while I'm here in Orange County. Like I said, we're so excited to be here. Let's just move right along. Okay, so I think you all probably have seen this in a few other meetings, but we figured we would put some hybrid meeting norms up, so that we're all on the same page. Masking is recommended, but is not required. I know I see Mark wearing a mask there. I can't really see anyone else in there, but y'all got it. It's recommended, not required. Also, please be mindful of social distancing. When if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand, whether if you're in person, raise your physical hand, and if you're on Zoom, if you could raise your hand through Zoom. And also make sure that you please say your name, and if you're a COH member, before you speak. We will also be having a 2-minute timer for public comments, just to keep us moving along. Also, please try and minimize distractions while you're in the room, but also for us that are on Zoom. We are asking and actually encouraging folks that are in the room, if you could log in to Zoom on your phone or on a laptop, that way you can stay engaged. Hopefully it's a little bit easier to stay engaged with folks that are coming in through Zoom. Food and drink, please just make sure you clean up after yourself and maintain a safe and respectful environment. And also, just as I had said, you probably already heard, but this meeting is being recorded. And then one last thing, if the meeting is interrupted for an emergency, the meeting will be suspended or canceled, but this is a case-by-case basis. All right. Any questions? None there. Any on Zoom? I don't see any. Okay. Oops. All right. So again, an individual may be asked to leave should they behave in a manner that threatens the safety of the group or does not honor these meeting norms. So we encourage everyone to honor these meeting norms. Okay, and also keep in mind, we hope that everyone will stay focused on the main goal. If any questions come up, please raise your hand, as I said, whether you're in person or through Zoom. Also take note of any power dynamics in the room. And again, take as many breaks as you need. If you're on Zoom, please feel free to just put it in the chat and say BRB. All right, so today's agenda. Wait, hold on one second. Let me just go through. Yes, okay. So we'll do introductions, we'll have public comment, we will finalize the 2023 renewal housing project scoring tool. Then we will review and discuss the 2022 new housing project scoring tool. And we will review any 2023 meeting schedule changes. As you all know, there's been some of that. There's a lot of back and forth, but we'll review those towards the end, and then we will adjourn. Let's see. Okay, so our meeting goals are to finalize the 2023 renewal housing scoring tool, which we started during our last meeting. And then we will review and discuss the 2022 new housing scoring tool so that we can hopefully implement the changes at our next meeting. All right, so at home base, we have Michelle, Mark and myself. We're happy to be here. Mark and Michelle, Mark is, well, you're both there actually. Oh wait, on Zoom too, there you are, Michelle. This is so interesting. But we're happy to be here. Please feel free to reach out to us if anything comes up. Let's see. All right, so Mark, how do we want to do this for introductions? Do we want to start with folks that are in the room?
Yeah, we could do that. Or we could go around maybe in the room and then go on Zoom.
Yeah, perfect.
So folks in the room, we could just go around. Want to start here with Sean?
Sure, Sean Ray, Sam Howell PD, I'm a lieutenant, Sam Howell Police Department, and I'm the public safety representative.
And go ahead, Michelle.
Again, Michelle Burns, topics.
Kiva Dean, whole community representative seat. I'm also on two things. Joe Bruno, peer support specialist with Delta Peers, currently one of the lived experience advisory seat on the council.
Wayne Earl, pastor at Rock Harbor Christian Fellowship in San Pablo, manager of special projects, Bay Area Rescue Mission, and I hold the faith community representatives.
Hi, everyone. Jamie Schechter, pronoun. I'm a public services chief with the Health Housing Public Services Division of Contra Costa Health Services. Long division. Jamie Jeanette. Health Housing and Homeless Services Community Engagement Specialist.
Do you want to pass the mic around? How we talk to?
Sorry, what was that?
We can, is it okay if we have folks on Zoom also introduce themselves really quick? Allowed?
Yeah, do we want to do it in the chat or out loud?
Let's do it out loud.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, let me just pull up the participants list so I can just go in order, make it easier for everyone. Adam?
Hi, I'm Adam Hudson. I'm part of Bay Area Community Services. I'm the program manager over the Don Brown Shelter.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I really apologize if I mispronounce anyone's names. Araba?
Yes, Alex, I'm here.
Thank you.
It's Araba. Yeah, you're
Araba?
good.
Okay, thank you. And then we have Emily.
Hi, everyone. Emily Downey, H3 MSW intern, she, her pronouns.
Thank you. And then we have Geeta.
Hello, everyone. This is Geeta Buramipur. I'm with the AOD Advisory Board, and also I'm with a 211 board member. Thank you. Great to be here.
And then we have, let's see, Joe introduced herself. Juno, I'm sorry, is Juno in the room?
Not today. I'm
Okay.
calling in from virtually today. Juno Hedrick, chair on the Council on Homelessness and one of the lived experience advisors, also Youth Action Council member. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them.
Thank you. And then we have Nicole.
Yes, hi, my name is Nicole Green. I am part of Game Plan for Success, Reentry Transition Specialist, and also a chair on CAP.
Thank you. And next we have Terry. Terry? No? Okay. And then the last two are Wayne and Kiva, which already introduced themselves. So thank you.
Alex, sorry, I was multitasking.
Oh.
I'm from, yeah, I'm from Hope Solutions. I'm the new contract manager. My pronouns are she, her. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So, let's see. Oh, we already did this. Okay, so now we have public comment. Anybody, I think what we'll do is we'll start with folks in the room. And then we can move on to if there's any public comment in Zoom.
No public comment in the room, it looks like.
Okay. Anybody in the room, in the Zoom room? Not seeing anything in the chat. No raised hands. Let me scroll through the. Nope. Okay. All right, Mark, I'll pass it on to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
What we're gonna do next is we are gonna talk about the renewal housing project scoring tool. If you were here at the last meeting in February, we started to talk about some of the recommended revisions from staff meeting page 3 and Homebase. And we didn't get through all of the potential changes in the renewal tools, so we want to continue there. For those who don't know, the COC has a competition every year for COC funding. And so that's called the COC NOFO. NOFO stands for Notice of Funding Opportunity. We did a whole intro at the last meeting. We don't have time, unfortunately, today to do a whole intro again. So if you're not familiar with it, you can certainly ask questions as we move along, but also you can refer back to the recording or the materials from the last meeting. In short, there are 2 scoring tools that are used to score applications in the competition. Every year, those scoring tools are updated. In previous years, they were updated in what was called the COC ESG Committee, which no longer exists. That function of updating the scoring tools and the process falls now under Funding Committee, which is a brand new committee within the Council on Homelessness. So one of those scoring tools are they look at renewal projects, so projects that received funding in the previous year and want to apply again to receive funding. So those are again existing projects. That's the renewal tool, and then there's the new tool, which is for new projects. That's the tool that we have not discussed yet in this committee. We're hoping to, if there's time, to at least start that conversation. But today, the big focus is to hopefully land in a place where we, Homebase, have directions from this group in terms of how to update the language in the renewal tool so that we can bring that ideally to the Council on Homelessness at the April meeting. So hopefully by the end of this meeting, we'll know the specifics of what y'all want to see change. And then we can bring back to the Council on Homelessness in April, because ultimately what this committee does is provide recommendations, and then the Council on Homelessness approves them or makes changes. Any questions about that process or where we are?
What, take yourself?
Yeah, all right, do that. Absolutely. Forgot to do that. Thank you, Joe. We have some experience from the last meeting, so I'm kidding myself, even though you can't see my mouth, bring it back. Hopefully that helps you. So guys, to go to the next slide, please, Alex. So these are the this overview of the staff recommendations. This is based on feedback in different ways from the previous year. And so we looked at, we got to number 1 and number 2, and we didn't finish number 2, and we didn't get to number 3. So we're going to revisit basically all of them. And then we came with some language to show y'all for 1 through 3, to give y'all an idea of what that could look like, see what your response is to the proposed language. So go ahead and go to the next slide. The first recommendation that we already discussed is for 2 of the scoring factors. And if you didn't look, there's materials that were sent to you in advance of this meeting and they're accessible online. I don't know if somebody can pull that up, maybe Michelle or Damien and link that in the chat, please. So folks want to pull up like the scoring tool, you can do that. But for 2A and 2B, and then what we're going to do, I think, Alex, hopefully you're queued up. Uh-oh, battery's running low, Damien.
No. What? Oh, hold on.
I don't know if folks on Zoom can see that, probably not.
Oh, ha! I have a power strip that wasn't on.
There you go, sorry.
I planned ahead, I promise.
There was a minor emergency that's now
Thank you.
been solved. Weren't sure if we were gonna have power on the laptop in the room. Crisis averted. So I think, Alex, would you be ready, Alex, if we wanted to screen share the actual tool as well? With the proposed language?
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
yes,
awesome.
yes. Hold on, okay, so we're ready to
You
move
don't have
to
to do
this
it.
one now?
You don't have to do it just yet, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Okay, thank you. So there are two scoring factors in the renewal tool, 2A and 2B. 2A is housing stability for permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing projects. 2B is exits to homelessness, and we wanted to continue what we did last year, which was for particular scoring factors that involve scaled scores. We wanted to make sure that we added language where if there was no one in the program that met that particular criteria, i.e. the denominator for that calculation is 0, that we gave panelists the discretion to be able to award full points, and also provide a narrative. So these are two scoring factors that we somehow missed last year, but we should have added that language. So this is a relatively small change that we're making, but this is consistent with what we did last year, which is to give panelists more guidance and not penalize a project for not having anyone in their program for that reporting period that met whatever the criteria was listed in the scoring factor. So I'll provide an example. If you could pull up that language, Alex, for 2A and 2B, we can show folks. Thank you.
Alex is saying that page 40 of the information that they need put into the chat.
Do you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. You can see me scrolling through. Okay,
So if we could zoom in a little bit to that, Alex, please.
yeah, let me zoom it in here. Is that better?
Folks in the room, see that okay?
Yeah, Alex, can you say what page of the scoring tool that's listed on?
What was that?
What page of the scoring tool itself? If you scroll down.
Oh, yes, I think it's page 44 of the PDF.
Right, on the document though, what's the page number?
Oh, let me check.
Can you scroll down a little bit?
6.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
So this is what we did. If you can scroll up a little bit, Alex. Thank you so much for doing this remotely for us. So this is 2A, housing stability for rapid rehousing and PSH and permanent supportive housing projects. There's slightly different scoring for the different program types. So what we did was we provided language that one requires an explanation if there was no one in the program during that reporting period that met the criteria. So if you look at that first section on top, rapid rehousing, exits to permanent housing, it says percentage of living leavers. That is people who exit the program who are alive, who exited to a permanent destination. So project will provide an explanation if there were no living leavers that exited to a permanent destination during this reporting period. And then it says where there are no living leavers that exited to a permanent destination during this reporting period, panelists may award 18 points with discretion. So 18 points is the max number of points they can get. So that is the language we included to reflect hopefully what the committee agreed upon last time we met. This is also consistent with what we did in previous year to clarify for panelists. So I don't know that we need to go through all of the language, but it's there if you want to read it, and certainly happy to answer any questions or take any comments about anything you'd like to see changed. So anybody have any questions or comments? Not seeing anything in the room, not seeing anything on Zoom. Alex, would you mind really quick going to factor 2B? In that same document. There we go. There we go. Yeah, right there is fine. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, same thing. I won't go through it, but you can see it there. So the question is, are you okay with this language? Are there any questions or comments?
quick question.
Go
These
for it,
were,
Wade.
these were auto scored, weren't they? I'm trying to remember. So will they continue to be auto scored or will they be scored? And I know we can adjust auto scored, but I remember that the spreadsheet templates that we use, we'll be able to make changes to this. Okay.
Yeah, so Wade's asking whether these are auto scored. What that means is we use a scoring system where the panelists, because Wayne was a panelist last year on the review and rank panel, and these were pre-scored based on the stats that were provided, the data that was provided by the program. And so that will continue to be the case. The panelists will get a pre-score based on what the data shows. So if there was no one who exited the program or met this criteria, then it would be a 0. And so the confusion was in years past, panelists weren't sure what to do when it said 0. Do we keep a 0? Do we have discretion to change it? What does that mean if it's 0? So what this is saying, this language we're providing here says that the panelists can take that 0 if no one in the program met the criteria that's listed in the factor, and they have the discretion to manually change the score up to the max. But the panelists should also read the explanation that the project provides. Does that answer your question, Wayne?
Yes.
So are we okay with the language here? Anybody have any problems or concerns? Okay, I see a thumbs up in the room from some folks and no question. Or hands raised and on Zoom. So we are gonna keep this language as is. And we are gonna keep moving. Thanks, folks. That was an easy one. So let's go to a trickier one. If you can go back to the
Sorry.
PowerPoint, please.
Yeah, do you want me to go back to the PowerPoint, Mark?
Yes, please.
Okay.
We'll start there and then we'll go back to the drawing tool after. All right. Let's see. Can you go back one or is that? There it is. Yeah, so just a refresher for folks maybe who weren't in the room when we had this conversation. There is a brand new scoring factor called racial equity. It's 3G. It's found in both the renewal and the new project scoring tool. We're only talking about the one in the renewal project scoring tool right now. It's for 4 points, so it was brand new, added last year. It was basically to award points based on how projects advance racial equity. And currently, the feedback that we received was that the factor could be better to prioritize higher impact strategies and require stronger evidence of practices from applicants. This was a lot of feedback that we got from the review and rank panel, and there's a couple of members in the room who took part in the review and rank panel. And so we talked a little bit last time about how to strengthen it. And so some of the things that stuck out was trying to do what that feedback says, was to separate out the higher impact strategies versus the lower impact strategies. There was some talk about potentially trying to add a threshold element so that the lower impact strategies could all be captured maybe in one bucket. And so we found a way potentially to do that, which will show you what we did in a second. I also wanted to highlight that in the 2022 NOFO, the racial equity section remained the same. So this is an actual grant application, remained the same as the 2021 NOFO, but it was worth 2 more points in 2022. So just showing that there's greater emphasis in scoring on racial equity. So I want to highlight that. And then the other thing that we tried to do was also, of course, address if there was a need or a desire for requiring a little more evidence of those actual strategies happening within the project, rather than just simply a narrative. I see Jamie has his hand. Go on.
This is Jamie S. Mark, to clarify what you said, the 2021 NOFO had 1 point for racial equity. The 2022 NOFO had 2 points. That is the HUD point they award to the COC you're talking about, or are you talking about the tool that our local community approved?
That's to the COC application.
Great. So HUD gave us more points for having stronger racial equity.
Yeah, great. And one of the ways, or part of the way that you can kind of reflect the work that's happening around racial equity is to update your local scoring tool to make sure that's something you actually check. Thanks for that question, Jamie S. Any questions in the chat that I'm missing? Okay. So what we're gonna do then is I'm gonna show you, you go to the next slide, Alex. I'm gonna first tell you the changes that we made before I show you the actual language, a lot of language. So hopefully this helps you as a primer before we show you the language. So this is what we did. We, again, based on conversation, we were trying to accomplish what the group desired at the last meeting. Doesn't mean it has to be what we came up with. You can definitely improve upon it further and make changes. So there were 8 strategies. I think actually there were 9 strategies total in the previous version or the current version of this factor. So what we did was we grouped 4 of the lower impact strategies together and to create kind of a threshold, but not exactly a threshold. The threshold generally what that means is if people don't do these things, they can't apply, period, for the NOFO. So we weren't sure we wanted to do that. So instead, what we did was we grouped the 4 lower impact strategies. We said basically you have to do all of these things in order to get 1 point. If you don't do any one of those things, you don't get that 1. Then the 4 higher impact strategies we grouped together. And then it was 1 point for 1 strategy, 2 points for 2 strategies, 3 points for 3 or more. 3 or more basically means 3 or 4. There's only 4. We also added language to require documentation for each of the strategies. So if you say you do 3 of the strategies, you gotta require some kind of a document, and we provide some examples of what those documents could be. But it is a little broad, it is a little open-ended because there's not an official, document of proof for each of those strategies. Wayne, real quick, go ahead.
Clarifying question, is that a document for each of the higher impact strategies or for all 7 or 8 strategies?
For all of them.
All of them, okay.
Yeah. So we are potentially asking for a lot of documents. They say they're doing 8 things. We're gonna require them to provide at least 8 documents, 1 for each of those. We deleted mention of an internal complaint process as part of the strategies, because that's already something that's required by COC for them to have. So we're not giving them credit for something they already required to have. And then we deleted a strategy participant engagement survey in terms of trying to make sure that people who complete those surveys that are participants in programs kind of reflect the racial demographics of the population served, because we felt like there was too much overlap between that and another factor, which is lived experience factor. So we didn't want to have it in 2 places. That's why we deleted it from here. And then then there's a consideration, we can talk about this afterwards, but just saying that we could potentially add up 1 point to this factor to make it 5 points. And then so what that we could do with that 1 point is basically add it to the 4 higher impact strategies. So instead of it being up to 3 points for 4 strategies, you can go up to 4 points for 4 strategies. So 1 point per strategy. But then we'd have to find where we're going to take that point from elsewhere within the scoring tool. Wayne, question?
Just sort of a meta question. I know we're going to be talking about lived experience strategies in a very similar vein. Are we also looking to possibly adjust the point value there as well?
We're not currently recommending that, but we could talk about that if you wanted to. I think there is more points for lived experience. Okay, lived experience factor than there is for racial equity. I think it's 5 points already.
So what we're actually looking to do is making lived experience and racial equity on par with each other for point values. Potentially, yeah. Our recommendation is yes, adding 1 point. Okay. But not necessarily for that reason. But it's part of the conversation. Yeah. It could be part of the conversation. But we do have to take that point from somewhere else when we decide to do that. So those are the changes that we made at a glance. So now we're going to pivot to the language itself. Alex, if you wouldn't mind going to the scoring tool. Yeah, there's a lot there. Alex, can you tell us what the page is? 14 or 15?
How about the whole thing?
Yeah, it is 15. It starts at 14, but it's really just the title. So
Yeah, I think that's Ross. Can you go to the next factor? Yeah, I think it's page
oh
8.
yes, sorry, thank you. You're right. We're doing 3G first. Okay, so it is 17 and 16. Or that, the opposite, 17 and 18.
18 and 19.
Yeah, 17, 18, and then 19.
Okay. Can you go up to the top of page 18?
Yes.
Thank
Okay.
you. All right, so you can see it there, that top, the first bullet is the lower impact strategies. That's effectively a threshold. Got to do all of those things for 1 point. The bullet below it, which is in the middle of the page, that's the 4 higher impact strategies. And then you can see some of the other things we did, removing the formal or informal complaint resolution process in the second bullet, removing the participant engagement strategies, activity, because that's already kind of reflected in the lived experience scoring factor. So I'm just gonna, I think maybe just sit with it for a minute and see if y'all have any questions or comments about it. Jamie, yes, go for it.
The only, under the 4 that are grouped, I would recommend either removing or rewording number 3 around regular training support. I don't know that the COC offered an explicit racial equity training in the past year, and it would be kind of making a barrier for students who don't have the resources to go out and to look at their own training individually. And it's also something that folks they weren't aware of was a requirement at the beginning of this the application period, so now they can't go back and create something out of nothing to earn these points. I think it's a great practice, and maybe bumping it down to the second area that if they did do that, you get a point, but it's not a lower paying group that we would envision.
What you're saying is the training isn't available right now. It's not clear that it's available.
It's not necessarily universally available. So I think we do training that have components of racial equity baked in, but I don't believe in the last year we provided a racial equity specific training. And so I love it that people are coming to the training, but if they're not kind of documenting their attendance and remembering that has that component to it, it would be difficult to provide that.
So there's a suggestion on the table to potentially move the training and support, which is the third bullet of for the third strategy under the first bullet, which right now is a lower impact strategy, citing that not all agencies may have access to that type of training, considering that the COC didn't provide that training for free this past year. So potentially move that to the higher impact strategy.
This is Joe. My question around that was going to be if they had an outside resource and they did get training, but it doesn't necessarily have to come from COH, like it can be an outside source.
Yeah. And if they did that, then and we moved it to the higher impact strategy, they would get a point for that.
Right. But it's not coming from us necessarily. That's the point there.
Yeah.
That it's not coming from us.
Yes. Wayne,
I do see the point in the spirit in that. However, I think the training is the baseline for everything. I would still leave it there, because so I would still leave it there, because how can you expect development towards more equitable outcomes without training for that? So I think a compromise position might be 3 of the, just the verbiage being 3 of the 4 gets the 1 point, and don't, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure anyone committed, they're going to pick that. I'm thinking that as a compromise. I'm also thinking what I'm concerned about. Wait a minute, this is a renewal. We're not talking about the new. Okay, leave it there, because anybody renewing is established enough and large enough I would leave it there. If this was the new scoring tool, I would be more concerned about that, because you have the potential of ruling out newer providers, smaller providers. But anybody doing a housing renewal, they've been established a couple of years.
right. Okay, thanks, Wayne. But another thing you can do, and then we'll go to Eva next, is so I heard 3 of 4 of the lower impact strategies. Maybe you get the point rather than 4 of 4. Another thing you could do is if you move that training strategy to the higher impact, you can give everyone a heads up that next year that's moving to the lower impact as part of the threshold. So you give people 1 year heads up to make sure that they get that training or the resources to get that training. Or maybe the COC is already been offered.
We will be, yeah.
Yeah, so it's another thing that could happen. Kiva?
So I was. I think, or impact, I get that there may be, some delay in CRC offering. But if we are, if they're renewed, like we will say, if they're renewed, then they're at least established, at least for 1 year. And then
Eva, can you raise your voice? Gina saying she can't hear.
I'm sorry. I'm usually too loud. I'm just simply saying that I'm not comfortable with taking it, the training out of the higher, the lower impact, because that is a basis, it's foundation. Or training is the foundation for anything. You have to know how to do something. And so if equity and inclusion, DEI, JEDI is going to be included in our policies and procedures for our service providers, then training has to be a baseline. That has to be one of the deal breakers. But I do say, I like what you said. I still say, don't put it in the higher threshold, because then people are going to see it in a certain way. So I just understand that maybe they can provide proof that they have a plan for the training, and they have a specific amount of time that they actually have to execute the training. So if you at the time of renewal, you providing verification that you have purchased a training program or training app, and then you have 3 to 6 months to tell us that you completed that training. Something like that. But I think that it should be in the lower impact, because I think that it's foundational. So it should be of higher impact.
Thanks, Kiva. Any response to that? Any other comments? Jamie, yes?
Yeah, I will say that though these folks are a little bit more established with their renewal project, let's not get it twisted where our users are flush, right? So it's really challenging to be able to secure high quality training. We don't want it to be the box checking exercise. And so that's really why I'm seeing this as a higher impact kind of situation, because it's so important. You want people to be getting good training, and it's an access issue to me. It's that not all of the providers that are covered under our COC funds have resources that can get that high quality, and so that's why they come to the COC. That's why we put it on, because we have a little bit of a better chance of that. And we will be offering training this year, so next year I would be more comfortable saying, yep, if you didn't attend, you don't get this 1 point. But I feel for the providers a bit on that. I'm trying to.
I see it a little differently than you. I see it as any even training, it could be brought up on an individual basis, and just having that discussion can be so valuable versus just having formal training. Sometimes that's the greatest training, is just someone talking about a subject matter that comes up, everyone discusses it and brings something different to the table. So even if it isn't formal COC training, I still see great value in it. So to exclude that would be a loss.
I like that perspective of training doesn't need to be, it could be a supervision, having a structured conversation. We could give folks a wider range of options as well.
And couldn't the training be a recording, like a previous recording, like here's our fundamental racial equity training, hour-and-a-half video, and that could be like the very first introductory that, like. My question to you, I have a circle here, in the actual line repetitive, are we keeping in by the COC? Or is that those 3 words getting taken out? Because I thought I was under the impression that's what you were talking about, was taking that out, but it's not necessarily specifically COC, not the whole training, but just the fact that it's not coming to us.
No, we included that So folks would know, like, they didn't have to go out and get their own, if they attended something with the COC, then that could count as well.
And we're not talking just like basic training, like you said, it's it's just not basic training.
Well, I think another comment Sean's making, that potentially we might want to consider opening the language up a little bit so that it doesn't seem like it has to just be formal training. There could be other ways that information can be shared and disseminated. That's another point of consideration.
And it may be reinforced by COC.
Is there a list of outsourced trainers that we already know that are doing this kind of training? There isn't any, huh? Not like that.
We'll go Kiva and then wait.
That's what I was gonna say. First of all, like when I held unit meetings, I would have one of my staff come in, we're gonna train. That one staff is gonna start a discussion, and then we're gonna have a discussion about this, right? So the staff member had to do their research, they had to find out whatever it was, and then present it to the discussion. And that is actually training. So to what Sean is saying, I think that at least starting the conversation, it does not, I'm the last person to say check off a box. I'm the last person to say that, but at least starting the conversation should count, but it has to be a formal conversation. And that's why I'm saying, tell us your plan, or tell us what you did specifically and give us proof. You said something.
Trying to be more inclusive of different types of strategies.
And so I am totally willing as an individual person to look for resources, to look for free and low cost resources. My daughter works with DEI Offload. It is an app, an actual app, and I joined it, and you can join it for free. And there's but I'm totally willing to look for DEI apps and trainings possibly, so that we can offer those to our providers.
Wayne
have it on tape.
Wayne and then Jeff.
I did see a hand in
Oh.
the in chat.
Can I just say, oh, sorry, this is Alex. After everyone in the room goes, we do have a couple hands up in Zoom, so if we can address those after, that'd be great.
Are you okay if we go to the first? So I see Geeta's hand. Go for it, Geeta.
Thank you so much. Is the budget designated to this training? Thank you.
The COC's budget does have designated funds for trainings overall, and it's here that includes racial equity training. So all of our trainings, like we're doing a harm reduction one, we've done outside for interviewing, those sort of things do have a budget within our COC planning frame.
Does that answer your question, Geeta?
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Geeta. Was there another hand raised? I'm not seeing one on Zoom.
I think that was it, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Alex. We'll go Wayne and then Jeff.
So we have to kind of understand the reality of, for lack of another term, human nature. We can require that this be done, but there's only so much we can do. I can turn on the COC training and just let it play over here with the screen off, and you don't even know. There's going to be people. I'm not saying there's going to be people that engage, and there's going to be people that do not. All we can really require are sort of these baseline things. I'm in agreement that we should loosen up the language a bit so that we can expand it a bit. I'm in agreement, maybe a list of possible resources we could provide that would be free or no cost. I think all of this is good stuff.
Thanks, Wayne. Joe?
Going back to my thought process about who's providing the training, and my question on, is it basic training or is it more specific training? I'm wondering, we can say racial equity training, and that's very, what do we mean by racial equity? We have that conversation. But then, is it systematic? Is that what we're looking at? Or is it very, very specific to the system of care of homelessness? Is our training going to be very specific to homelessness? Or will it be just that larger umbrella of what racial equity we're trying to focus on
Yeah.
homelessness.
Jeannie J chose the wrong time to leave the room. Go for conversation is that, we've been asked to provide, a local perspective so that it can inform the training. But I'm sure it'll give a broad enough context so that people who might be brand new or might, day one on their job can walk in there and not get lost.
All right, okay. I still like the very specific kind of focus group on homelessness, actually, very specific around that system of care. But that's maybe later in the conversation. Cool.
I think that naturally arises out of the work that people do. I think if you begin with the training and mindset around this and around your lived experience, those things lead to that naturally. I think ultimately we see the difference in the complaint panel. Ultimately, we see the difference in the renewal scoring that we see and all of this stuff. I think that's where this leads to, but we're at kind of a higher level. Where it makes the differences in the front lines.
And I think that our providers are not just providing housing a lot of times for
Yes.
the clients. They're working with their clients holistically.
Yes.
So having a larger umbrella and larger conversation around PEI is can be beneficial for the provider as well.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to sum up where we are in this conversation. We have to, for the sake of time, I think, take probably new comments about any other suggestions or ideas about how to improve this section. But regards to training support, what I'm hearing is maybe we won't move it to the higher impact strategies. We'll leave it in lower impact strategies. We'll keep it a threshold. At one point, we have to do all of these things, but we're gonna make the language a little more broad, a little more flexible around what training could look like, and include other forms of formal ways that conversations can take place around racial equity within an organization. And, which I think is a great idea, I think it's another COCs, we are gonna try to provide some kind of resource list so that folks don't have to at least guess or start from scratch regarding where they can get racial equity training. And there's racial equity training coming from the COC, but they're not making that a requirement for them to have that kind of formal racial equity training in the past year because the COC hasn't provided.
Right. And I believe we're looking to schedule that in May or June. If the NOFO is released by the time that the project applications are due, we will have posted the training, I believe. So if folks are okay, we could say if you attended the scheduled training you did provide, I'd be comfortable having that count for it.
It would be good to notify, to get that notification.
It will be labeled as the COC provider required,
Right. I think we can do that and still make the language a little more broad and flexible. Okay, and then we can think about, now that once we've done that, we can think about how next year we may raise the level of the threshold. So it sounds like there's some desire to. Okay, does that reflect kind of where we're at? So we are not going to remove training and support. We're just going to change the language. We'll leave it in lower impact strategies. Anybody in the chat have any questions or comments about that before we move on? Sorry, not in the chat, on Zoom. More than just chat. All right, so okay. Anything else in regards to the racial equity factor, the proposed language? Any thoughts, concerns, questions? If not, I'm gonna raise one. So, if there are 8 strategies total, which there are currently, and if an organization said, we do all 8 of those things, I want both people putting on their panelist hat, because for folks who've been panelists, and also for folks who are in a program, agency, provider, think about what you're gonna have to do if we keep this language. We're gonna ask for that provider, that agency who said they do all 8 of those things to submit 8 different documents.
Yes.
That means the panelists are gonna have to review all those documents. It might be completely different types of documents based on you know, what the agency can provide, because there's not a standard for each of the strategies. Think about the level of burden that is for applicants to have to do that for, right now, what is this word, 4 points? So curious to see what y'all think about that.
The power of cut and paste. We had, what, 20 renewals, but maybe 7 providers. You know, and you had the same grant writer, you could easily tell. This was part of our frustration, was the cut and paste, you know? And it makes sense. You've got one organization and they've got 3 or 4 or 5 projects that they're redoing. You know, of course, they're gonna use the same verbiage, they're gonna do the same programs. So I'm open to the feedback from the providers, right? To see if this is an untoward burden on them. I definitely want to hear that. But I think this is, what we saw was we were giving a lot of points for a lot of cut and paste. You know, people, like every provider got 4 points, I think, for those first 4 items that we were grouping in one thing. And so I think what we're trying to capture is we want more, you know, which is more in line.
Thanks, Wayne. Go for it, Sean.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Wayne, because that's exactly what I saw, to where sometimes the cut and paste didn't even fit to what they were talking about. But yet there was people in the panel that were like, oh no, and so we were giving people points that probably shouldn't have got any, because we were told, no, they do this stuff, and which is also almost question, is this just something that's kind of a go through the motions type thing? And really, because it didn't even make sense. There were times they really should have got no points because they cut and paste something that didn't even fit to it. So I question, and then it makes you question the process. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious if that we're kind of in a sticky wicket a little bit, because HUD says project by project, that's what we bring. And something like a written commitment to your organization mission, that's gonna automatically be the case. Nobody, if they write 9, but they have to have a partition for projects that have funds. So that's a challenging nut to crack. It's not a solution, it's a reflection.
But then I saw, this was interesting, I saw youth programs coming along, and you could tell they put into it. And they probably would have outscored the ones that got it, but the ones that have been established. So it just makes me wonder, you know, is there an expectation? We've been doing this, we have this big program, it's just gonna keep going. Meanwhile, these new programs that want to come in, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. I don't know, it's just make me question the whole thing.
I agree.
Well, what I will say is that last year, a new project was the highest rated project. And it was by an established organization, some program. So I think new folks or new projects have this similar way to kind of document and demonstrate. What I think is challenging a little bit is that the places where we would want to see differences really at that program level. Why is your data looking funky? And then we definitely rank some folks lower because data
Yes.
not threshold they should have been hitting. But automatically things like housing retention and whatnot are easier to prove than renewal. And there's a priority around renewals so you can ensure continuity of services for folks who are housed currently. So that's always the tension. We want to fund everything and our allocation isn't large enough to do so.
There's a focus on quantity rather than quality. And newer projects tend to be more qualitative. They're more willing to tell the story. But truth is that people won't check these boxes off.
They're gonna gain.
People are going to, they're going to do whatever they need to do to get that money. They're going to check these boxes off. There are plenty of people that are going to sit at that computer, turn the training, and then do something else. We understand that. That's human. But at least they get to see that we're looking to hold them accountable. And yes, it's a lot more work. It could. It does not particularly have to be a lot more work. For instance, if you have a language, if you have provided language service, provide a photocopy of your card with your language pamphlet, right? Not a big deal. We see, you know, there are plenty of things on this list that could be proven in a very concise way. So I'm not saying the providers will do that. But you know, I try, except for talking, I try to be concise. So I think that they're there, and we are telling them that we're looking for this. They're gonna take some thought to it. They're gonna put some thought in it, if nothing else.
And in their defense, we had what, a 30-day short period of the NOFO last year. It was 30 days shorter. So there was some editing that didn't happen, you know, and I expect them, the reason we're thinking, I expect them to gain. I expect them to check boxes. I ain't mad at you. You're trying to get funding. We're trying to make sure people get housed, right? And they're trying, you know, and they're both necessary, you know, so.
I think those goals are the same.
Yeah. They are.
Right, like to give our providers full credit.
Yes.
They're doing great work out there. They're focused on housing as well. And so what I want this tool to reflect, at least personally, is how are we getting the information we need while also letting them spend the maximum amount of time they can spend housing people? Not
Yeah.
right.
Any,
You know, we learned our petition, I looked up and down 15 times. And the very next minute, I had a challenge to that. Yeah. So, you know, the point is that if they see it on there, they're gonna start paying more attention to it. And even if they're doing check, at some point, maybe I should really take this seriously.
thanks, Eva. Thanks, folks in the room. I see Juno with her hand raised, but also just want to highlight before I pass it over to Juno, just any providers in this space, if you have any thoughts on this conversation, we'd love to hear from you. Juno, go for it.
I think that there is something to be said to having, you know, more of those, you know, inner thoughts as part of the inner workings as part of the, you know, application. And I'm kind of torn because on one end, you know, I hear that side of things. On the other end, I also hear, you know, I hear Wayne and I understand the bureaucracy of obtaining funding and how, you know, it is inevitable for there to be some of that, those check marks. And then I hear, you know, I hear Jamie S as well, you know, reminding us that, you know, more time that spent on doing these applications and making sure that they are, you know, the more time that's spent in doing these applications, the less time it's spent serving populations, I guess. And so I feel like there's a happy medium somewhere. I think that maybe it was, you know, having been a participant in the last NOPO review, maybe it was, you know, a little bit too much towards the, you know, checking boxes kind of feeling for me, but also it was understanding that there was less time this go around for everybody. And so I know there's a middle ground there. I just don't know exactly where it lies yet from a personal standpoint.
Thanks, Gino. Anyone else want to chime in on this conversation? Again, hoping for some more provider perspectives. I see Geeta's hand raised. Go for it, Geeta.
Thank you. And I just wanted to share my experience also. And when I was filling up the application, it helped me a lot to organize my thoughts as how I'm going to run this business and how it's going to be, how many employees I have. So it was excellent guide for me to follow, maybe what I'm talking, the word I can't think of to my word, but I can think about my business, and that was really important. But as for on the other side, I have another opinion, if I may, and that is when you are listening to people and reading, please be a banker. Banker doesn't hand out money without really know who you are, what you do, what have you done, and what is your experience. So it is important to sit on the other side and judge them as a banker, not just, you know, yes, that's 2 point, that's 3 point. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Geeta. any other comments from folks before I try to sum up where we are?
Just one other thing, is I think the tool itself will display whether, I agree with you, I think we're all talking about in the panel, we had this continuum, it seemed a little bit too, and we're trying to move it towards the center over here. And because almost everybody got all these points, it was like the points didn't matter. You know, you could take them all away from everybody and everybody was on equal footing. I think finding a place where there's some differentiation, but it isn't a place where nobody gets the points. You know, that's when we know we've gone too far, you know.
Got it. Thanks, Wayne. Go for it, Kiva. Last comment. Good.
To speak to your PowerPoints. If they do all 8, I say, if they do all 8, give them 5 points. Why not? And the extra point for doing all.
Okay. So proposal on the table, if they do all 8, they get 5 points.
And you have to pull a point from someone.
Yeah, so I think that's what we were,
That was only according to your proposal.
yeah, so according to that was a consideration we were asking, we do have to pull the point from somewhere else, so that's something the group wants to do, then we'll have to identify that place. We also don't have to necessarily finalize that right now, we can talk about that later on. But before we move to that piece, just want to hear or acknowledge there's a lot of different considerations around this topic of whether or not this is a fair burden to expect from providers in terms of providing evidence that all of the strategies they say they're doing are actually happening. Didn't hear enough of like strong comments either way to edit what is currently is. I think that's what I was hearing. So perhaps we can try this for this year, and definitely home base can, just like we always do, but capture feedback and bring it back to the committee. Obviously, we can talk about this also during we can make sure that there's a question that we're asking the panel during the debrief that we do with the review of our panel. We can make sure to ask a question or two to applicants specifically in the survey that we send out. So we can try to capture folks' feelings and thoughts after having done this for one iteration. I see Jamie has his hand, go for it.
Just finding that when we do like the TA session and the workshop in advance, I think it's important to call out that documentation can be screenshot, whatever. So it's not necessarily 8 separate documents, but take a picture of your website, put it there, and then on like a document, take a picture of, your translated flyer, put on the document. Hopefully not uploading 8 different things.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, what I'm hearing is in the TA workshop and just in terms of providing clear information to the applicants that there are different ways you can meet what we're asking and trying to show that hopefully it's not as high burden as you may think it is on that first slide. So okay, those are great ideas. Did I see? Oh, Geeta has
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, go for it,
Yeah.
Alex.
No, I was just gonna say Gita has their hand up.
Thanks, Alex. Go for it, Geeta.
No, I'm sorry, I'm Lauren, that's from past, Oliver Laura, sorry about that.
Oh, okay. That's an old hand.
One other, there's just another request for Zoom for people to speak up when they're talking. You might feel like you're yelling, but people are in trouble hearing.
And I should do a better job of modeling. We should, if we can, say our name every time that we speak, just to make it clear for folks who's speaking in the room. So, okay, so we'll try to do that. Sorry, folks, on Zoom. So okay to move on from that topic, then we're gonna leave it as is. Any other comments about the racial equity factor? So what we talked about was potentially moving out the training part under the lower threshold, or sorry, the lower impact strategies, but we decided to keep it. We're gonna broaden that language a little bit to be more inclusive of different types of ways that you can have those conversations in an organization. We talked about potentially changing up that we're requiring potentially 8 different documents. They do 8 different strategies, but we're saying we're going to keep that as is. We're going to need to provide one piece of evidence for each of the strategies that you say you're going to do, and we'll capture feedback about that and make sure we're clear about what that could look like when we're giving people information about how to. So I think other than that, we're keeping, because I'm not seeing any other hands raised, we're keeping all the other language that we're proposing here as is. I see heads shaking, room, yes. Feel free on Zoom, we love a thumbs up or something indicating that you're still with us. A heart emoji, Joe loves the emojis, celebration. All right, cool, some hearts, there you go, Joe, we got some heart, we got a thumbs up. Okay, so we are keeping it as is. Thanks, folks, for that robust discussion, really important. I think ultimately this counts as improving the racial equity factor, and we'll see how it goes. And this, we can continue to improve upon it in the future. All right, so we're gonna go back to the slide deck, if you will, Alex. Time check, we're about 30 minutes from the end of the meeting. I think we're ending at 4:15. So we're gonna try really hard to get through all the renewal stuff. But if we needed to, we could carry the renewal conversations to another meeting, but we're gonna try really hard to get through it and to end on time. Last time we did not end. So we'll try really hard. The good news is, even though we haven't talked about this yet, 3F, lived experience engagement, scoring factor, to try to capture how programs are involving folks with lived experience. And the good news is that we took your guidance already preemptively from the racial equity conversation. We've already queued up some language around this, so we don't have to start from scratch. So we basically try to do a similar thing, but before I jump in, I just want to give a high level overview. The feedback was similar to the racial equity feedback we received last year. Better prioritize, higher impact strategies require more evidence. So you're going to see that again in the proposal that we're going to share. And then also wanted to highlight that in the 2022 NOFO, we didn't get to talk about this because we didn't have time because it was only a 60-day window. Normally what we do, there's a 90-day window, which by the way is not that much more time, but it's more. We might try to, if there are significant changes when the NOFO is released, we might actually try to reconvene this committee one time really quick to see if we can incorporate those changes into the scoring tool, but we couldn't do that last year because it's too quick. So I want to highlight that in the 2022 NOFO, quote, with DV bonus funds, with domestic violence bonus funds based on COC application score, so this is a COC application, and how the provider will involve survivors with lived experience in the policy and program development. So basically there are points available in the COC application if for DV bonus funds or programs that serve people who are domestic violence survivors, that if the providers can show how they involve survivors with expertise. We actually did in our proposal that I'm about to show you, we did capture that in the scoring factor. So just wanted to call that out. And similar to the racial equity slide, there was an increase in COC app points for lived experience engagement. It went from 1 to 3. I think racial equity was 1. So you can see, you know, for better or for worse, you can see how HUD is prioritizing that in terms of points.
As a provider, we're seeing a significant increase in people fleeing domestic violence, like double what we saw last year.
So, okay, so that's an overview. Next slide, please. So similar to the racial equity factor, we have two, well, we have a lower impact and a higher impact. Here we have 2 lower impact strategies that are grouped together. 1 point if both are implemented. 3 higher impact strategies are grouped together. 1 point for 1, 2 points for 2, 3 points for 3. We also added language to require documentation, similar to racial equity. We added the DV survivors language that I just mentioned. There was this portion that was about asking the provider to provide an example of feedback that they received from folks with lived experience and actually incorporating or implementing that. So we reduced that from, I think it was 2 points to 1 point. So we're still asking them to do that, like give us a specific example of something that happened, but only 1 point for that now. And I'll explain, you'll see why, because we needed basically points to be attributed elsewhere in terms of the higher and lower impact strategies. We also revised the agency board strategy to 2 people with current or past experiences of homelessness or other regular mechanisms. I'll explain that. So we used to be 1 person with experience, but there have been different places where conversations have happened where folks have expressed how only having one person of lived experience or really of any particular demographic can be tokenizing. And so we wanted to see what y'all thought about potentially raising that from 1 to 2. You don't have to stick with that, but that is the proposal right now. And then this other regular mechanism, I think H3 highlighted that for H3 programs, because H3 does operate some programs within the COC. In addition to playing separate staff, their role as on the admin side, but they don't have a board of directors similar to nonprofits do. So we thought that we include some language that allows them still to meet the criteria, but doesn't have to be a formal board of directors. So that's there. Also, we added language that the lived experience advisory board strategy should meet on a regular ongoing basis. I know in some communities, I'm not saying necessarily this community, people get points for having one, but they haven't met in a really long time, or they don't meet regularly, maybe don't even have any members. So we want to make sure that not only is there a board, but they're actively meeting and discussing and getting work done. So that's an overview of the changes. Go ahead, if you can go please, Alex, to the document.
I do have a comment about the 2 people on the board. This is just based on the 88, the conference we just got back from. And there was a significant part of the conference that was geared towards, lifting up lived experience and a significant component. And my concern, I don't see how you avoid tokenism either way. As someone with lived experience who actually sits on a board, there aren't very. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I feel about that. I think at least 1. I think that's, but I don't see how 2. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
This is key, but statistically, the more information we have, more correct information.
Yes.
Right. So if you have only 1 person sitting on the board with domestic violence, they have a specific domestic violence situation.
Yeah.
You're only getting the view of that one situation. I am for almost a year, I was the only Black person. That's board. And though, and that felt like tokenism. And there's a second one on there, and it still feels like tokenism. So that's, unless you have a board of 100 people and you get 60, that's always going to be an issue. But I do like the idea of 2, because then you at least have a conversation. You can't have a conversation with 1 person. And when I'm talking about between the people with lived experience. So I like the idea of GFC, but that might be difficult.
Yeah.
I think that on the other hand, it might be difficult to find 2 people who are willing to make that kind of fit.
Yes.
Let's go with, sorry, I don't know the order. Okay, so Jamie, Gita, Joe.
So a couple of thoughts to me. Do we know how big people's boards are?
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
if someone has a very small, I mean, you really only need a treasurer, president, and vice president
Yes.
to be nonprofit threshold.
That's good.
So that can be a difference maker in whether this can be an effective measure. And I also think that some of the largest recipients of COC funds are H3 and the housing authority, who won't meet this criteria, won't be filling the same criteria that other providers will be. And so it's not getting unfair.
Got it. Thanks, Jamie. Gita, and then Joe.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that this is not a business training, because we're not here to teach people how to run a business. They should know how to run a business before they come here, because that's what they would be doing with the funds. They were running a business to help our community for that particular business. So to have somebody, and I'm very, very for it, don't get me wrong, but having somebody that have a life experience doesn't mean they can be a great business person. I'm not saying they won't be able, but they're not necessary. So we have to make sure when we interview with these people and give them a grade, make sure they can run a business, plus they have been they had a life experience. So running a business, I think it's more important. I get a more emphasis. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Geeta. Go for it, Joe.
So there's three things actually. Couple of questions. So the agency, the applicants, do they have a clear understanding why the experience perspective is important? And do they know how to find them? And then the next question is that, is there a way that we can build a foundation to say, hey, so here are, here's a group of experience advisors. You can reach out to them specifically because they have a story to tell, whatever it is, and going into that lived experience of homelessness. So Kiva brought up at this point, like you can have a perspective of somebody playing domestic violence and becoming homeless, and have somebody with a perspective of, you know, whatever the other story could be, but both of those stories are very important to the overall definition of homelessness. So I say, if you have a lived experience more, one or more, you just got to make sure that they're coming from different crises prior to being homeless, because it's a different perspective. So I think big overall, I'm interested in finding out a way to make this process easier for the applicants to get the experience into their, and how can we do that to help them if they have no idea where to get it. Like what Geeta said about that, in the business, you have to have a certain level to get to this table from a lived experience perspective. You can't just, anyway, that's a whole nother systematic problem. But so I'm just wondering if there's a foundation, is there a network, bottom line on where to share that lived experience and how to get it to this applicants.
Who's first? Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Sorry, do a better job, Joe.
So I can speak that specifically because I sit on board of directors with lived experience. Board of directors is, so I think an organization is more benefited by people with experience at the program and director level rather than the board level. Because I sit on the board level, not just because I have lived experience, I sit on the board level because I have fundraising and network experience, you know, and everybody knows me and I know everybody, you know, and that's what Geeta means about running the business. It's a very different, it's very useful on the board that I sit on, but there are very few, very few, you know.
I think there's more than you think. I think there's a lot more of us than, I mean, they're out there.
I'm not saying that they're not. I'm saying there are very few business people with the level of connections and resources to sit on boards, you know, without the lived experience, you know. And so this is a small subpopulation of a small subpopulation. I'm not saying it's not there. I'm not saying there won't be more. I'm saying it's been my experience in an organization that has approximately 40% people of their employment lived experience that it makes a bigger difference when it's in their programmatic than it is before. So yeah.
Thanks, Wayne. Jamie?
I guess I'm gonna push back on the concept of business being ultimate goal of the board. The board ultimately, in a nonprofit setting, is there to set strategies, they provide oversight, their fiduciary responsibilities, all of that. They're not the chief financial officer. And so to me, the reason, one of the reasons having developed experience in that ring is because that's where power is considered. And the goal of having that representation is to have people with experience have power. Because we've done traditional nonprofit business models, delivery of services for many years, decades, and it hasn't worked, hasn't been homelessness, right? And so I think changing the perspective of, but not business as usual, expertise as usual, professionalism as usual, and reducing the barriers so that people who are best equipped to solve the problems are in the room with other people who have those complementary skills. So it's about expanding that leadership role to incorporate more and different skill sets.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. We'll go Kiva, and then I'm going to try to sum up the convo and then we need to move on. Go for it, Kiva.
I just want to, I've had this conversation just recently. I've sat on several boards, and one board said they need capacity and resources. And the thing is that Wayne is perfectly right when he says that when you're on the board, they're looking for what you can do, your capacity or your resources. And most boards do not, they only have 1 or 2 people in the heart area, but it is really important that we sit on that board to remind people, right? And so as Gita was saying, she's absolutely right. When you're on the board and you don't have capacity or you don't have resources, it's almost as if, why am I here, right? Because that's how you're viewed, that's how you're seen, right? But it is really important. So again, to your point of 1 to 2 people, I like the idea of 2 people because there's a conversation between the 2 people aside from the board. There's a conversation between 2 people about the differences of their experience, which makes a broader conversation. However, board directors is a big commitment. It's a time commitment, and it's a commitment that a lot of people who are currently in their lived experience may not be able to do. So I'm not saying that I'm actually for the 2 people, but I'm saying like.
Thanks, Eva. And thanks everyone for sharing your thoughts on this. A lot of great conversation. It sounds like there's not enough clear consensus around changing this to 2. I think in an ideal world, what I'm hearing is yes, it would be great to have people with lived experience, more people with lived experience in these circles with the power to make these decisions to impact how programs run. But there's a lot to it. There's how do these organizations find these folks in the first place? How do they make sure they're equipped? How do they make sure that the board itself is a place where people can feel involved, want to participate, feel supported? How big are these boards even in the first place? If there's only 4 people, then total, then to find 50%, that might be a big threshold for some. Also the issue of like H3 and Housing Authority, they have a slightly different way to meet this criteria that might be easier, especially if we're asking nonprofits to have 2 people on the board. So for all those reasons, maybe we don't, so it sounds like we're not gonna do 2. We'll keep it at 1, but we're gonna create a memo, home base, like we did last year, where there were plenty of things that came up in this conversation about bylaws where didn't feel like they necessarily needed to impact how we change the bylaws today or in this conversation, but definitely needs to be conversations that need to continue in other spaces. And in order to make sure that we're accountable to these conversations or items that come up, we're going to include, I think, this conversation, the points that you made in that memo, to potentially come up again in future governance conversations or in other spaces in the COC. So I just want to say that as well. So are we okay to move past this conversation? We're going to change 2 people to 1. And then I'm going to ask in the 15 minutes that we have left, our goal is to finish this factor and then go to another conversation before potentially wrapping up the renewal project. But that's also dependent upon if other people have things queued up, want to talk about other things. So again, we can table or finish this conversation at the next meeting. It'd be great if we can finish it now, but it's fine if we have to keep going. But any other comments, questions, changes to the lived experience factor? It looks like Joe wants, yeah, go for it, Joe.
Can we bring this conversation to the next meeting again? Talking kind of like really, this one ending, Rachel, like, because it seems like there's a lot to say about it. We think having maybe a little bit of time to keep talking about this. And, I'm really curious on that thread on getting the lived experience perspective to those other agencies. So I don't know if that's part of this overall conversation or if that's another conversation somewhere else. That's what I'm interested in. Even with the training, trying to get the training to the organization, that thread between those 2 topics.
Yeah, I literally changed my mind after each person talked.
I want to think more about your perspective. I do. But
One thing I'll note though, just because we're building it into a curriculum, I know lots of our have people with experience in very meaningful roles in leadership, so we're talking without kind of the full impact of all of their operations. But we know, I know what it was.
I just have a question. These are our providers that are providing services to people with lived experience.
Mhm.
So I'm not understanding why there would be an issue finding somebody. You're providing people, you have homeless people that you're providing housing to. You should be able to talk to one of those people, two of those people, and say, "Hey, come and get on my board. This is not me," you know. So I'm not quite sure if I understand what the issue would be around findings.
I can share my
Okay.
experience. So my experience is, we as a group, come alongside a lot of people, mentor people, decide on people, all of that. So, the focus has been on programmatic, right? In our organization, at a tipping point where a significant percent of our program have lived experience, you know, and it really impacts, you know, our VP of programs has got lived experience, you know, all of that. It really impacts. And so what we're doing is we're building a community that takes time, you know. It's not that there aren't people like myself or other people or people like Joe that aren't available and aren't already. It's that people like myself are working with people that are growing and changing and all of that to help prepare them. Hey, this is what I've done. This is what we're doing. So this, I think, the focus on this is a shorter time window than on the academics. I think focusing on either one deals with both of them because they're both two sides of the same coin. You know, so I think this is gaining momentum. That, you know what I'm saying? I think we're almost there.
And this is Jamie, and so this is also can be a different paper for a small project, right?
Yeah.
We have, and even if you have one project, very small set of units, if you have 10 people in those units, convincing one of 10 people is hard to say, okay, you're gonna join our board and be committed for a year and come to, that's the challenge. It's not that they don't know where people are, it's that you gotta find that match, right? Thank you.
And then Geeta has her hand raised, and then we'll move on after this comment or question. Go ahead, Geeta.
I just want to say one more thing about 1 versus 2. You're right. We can go out there and get as much as information. Let's say I go out there and just one, and I get as much as information and the knowledge, and that's my job. I'm running a business. I better know what I'm doing. Otherwise, what am I doing here? So having 2 people with another person with me, that makes it a little harder because now 2 people are making a decision or 1 person making a decision. What if I believe we should do it this way and the other person should this way? I experience homelessness one way and the other person experiences homelessness another way. So always makes it harder to, and makes it less qualified people for 2 versus more opening for more people to qualify. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Geeta. All right, so I'm gonna.
One more, I know,
Okay.
sorry,
Okay, go
sorry,
ahead,
Joe, one more quick thing. Awesome saying this, it's like, there is the definition of systematic lived experience perspective, and then there's the definition of the individual person with lived experience. Those are 2 different job titles, those are 2 different roles. The person in the lived experience seat, in that very specific seat, doesn't necessarily have any other responsibility other than that. They're not talking about this, that, or whatever else. They're talking specifically about their lived experience. So there's this idea that there's a difference between systematic working for the system and having lived experience and bringing somebody with lived experience to the table. Those are 2 totally different job titles, 2 totally different responsibilities. And I think that needs to be flushed out with us as well as the organizations.
Thanks, Joe. I want to go back to the question that you asked earlier, a little earlier, Joe, about if we can continue this conversation for the next meeting. We can. Just want to give you an idea of kind of what we were thinking in terms of timing. We heard whispers that the no code could drop, meaning the actual notice of funding opportunity could drop as early as May. But we don't know if that's actually going to happen. We also heard that potentially they might give us longer runway. At the least, we know that HUD does not want to replicate what they did last year with a 60-day window. not just for applicants, but also for their staff. They were overwhelmed as well. So
We did ask for a stipend too.
So we don't know if any of that's gonna come to fruition. We still kind of expect it's gonna come out the same time, which is any time during the summer. And we generally expect a 90-day window, which is the normal competition period. All that to say, like, we try to wrap up the scoring tool changes that we make by like June. And so if this renewal scoring tool conversation continued to the April meeting, I think it's fine. And again, anyone feel free, home-based staff, H3 or anyone else has experience with this pushback, if you think this is not good advice. I think we could carry that to April if we made sure that we finish this conversation about the renewal in April so that we can get it approved in May in the event that there's a super early release of the NOFO. Because once the NOFO is released, generally what we do is we have renewal applicants because they already exist. They've been through this process before. We sequence it. We go, all right, renewal applicants, you submit your stuff first, and then the new applicant, which is why last year the review and rec panel got renewal applicants first, and then new project applicants next in terms of sifting through the material. So I think it's okay as long as by the May meeting that we can approve that renewals scoring tool at council. And then at the April meeting, hopefully we can also try to see if we can finish up the new project scoring tool. We do have that May meeting that's scheduled with this committee that we can carry that to, but that would push the new project approval to June, which I think it's okay, but I'll also say that the renewal project changes, new project changes that we're gonna propose are very short and simple. Plus, they're kind of following the lead of what you're doing with the renewal project scoring tool, is namely around lived experience and racial equity. So these changes we imagine that you're making to the tool, we're probably going to carry most of it, if not all of it, over to the tool. Might change some language here and there. So we're expecting that to be relatively. So I just want to give you an idea. Any questions or comments about that?
Wait, just one question. It's this change plus the RSH, PSH kind of change that we talked about. Those are the two things that remain. Correct?
Yeah, it's this. Actually, can you go back to the slide deck, Alex? So looks like we have to come back to that because I don't think we finished all the comments for that. It's fine. So if you can move forward in the slides, thanks, Alex. So the next one, we're gonna have a conversation about kind of the scoring differential, the preference of the system that's identified in terms of in this community. There's a preference for PSH over RRH programs.
Yes.
And so panelists gave feedback, some of them in the room, during the last process about how we wanted to revisit that or at least have a conversation about that. So we don't actually have a proposal for any change. The staff, we just wanted to bring that conversation up. And then so we don't know how long that's going to take. Depends on what folks' feelings or thoughts are in the committee. And then go to the next slide, please, Alex. I think that's it. And then, well, sorry, I think Terry at the last meeting brought up the issue of unspent grant funds. That can be a quick one. I think Terry just wanted to make sure that it was highlighted specifically in that scoring factor that there are some programs, particularly ones that have rental subsidy or rental funds, that we just highlight how that's kind of expected with those types of programs to have some unspent grant funds. So make sure the panelists are aware of that, basically. They don't dock their scoring unnecessarily or unfairly. So that one we can do pretty quickly. Yeah, go for it.
The only problem with that was I found that seemed to be a go-to for everything. Every time there was leftover funds, we needed to leave it there because there was always this overhanging, oh, well, we can't dock them for that because they're not using it. It became to where no one, there was literally, there had hundreds of thousands left on the table, but we were using this system. Well, don't dock them on that because of this or that. There's always some reason that someone could use it. So just leave it there. That's just money that we're giving back. And then I was told, well, they lose it forever. Next year, when they apply for it, would they just ask for a different amount? I mean, why are they losing it forever? So I didn't really understand that the whole process of that. Like I said, it seemed too easy to just leave that money on the table over and over again.
I agree with you. It seemed to make sense that was the explanation when it wasn't such a large sum. But there was some, I think I remember some really big ones.
Yes.
So it sounds like we definitely want to have a conversation about that before we agree on what change to make. But I just want to flag that that's a conversation we're gonna have.
In preparation for that conversation, I wonder if we could look at past year scores and to see how we address that. I think for the following up, you're right, it went from year to year, and then I think there were projects that lost points for the allocations.
Okay, so in advance of the next meeting, we will do some research on how that played out in the last competition. Joe?
I'm trying to make sense of this. If the unspent funds, if they lose it forever, right? Like, can we track if they not used them in the past before and then they didn't use them again the next year? Like, is it just continually just not being used anymore?
I mean,
Because if that's the
something
case,
that
then we
would
can,
have the application.
yeah, we might want to look for that. If it's just sitting there for years and years and years, then why? Like, what is?
So that's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
This is-
At some point, focus on the reasoning.
So here's what we'll do. We're gonna look back 3 years.
Yeah, just for the unspent.
I'm like, I don't want to over promise anything. We're gonna look back, me as in me and Alex.
Yeah.
Look back 3 years in the competition process. I think we have all that data. And we'll give you a picture, some themes that we'll pull out from that. And hopefully I can help inform this conversation of what we'll do, if anything, in terms of changing what the scoring tool looks like around 4B. So I just want to give you an idea. So yes, revisit the whole scoring differential between PSH and RRH. Finish the conversation about lived experience factor, which I think we're almost done with that one. But it makes sense to want to sit with it again, maybe even come back to the racial equity one if you all want to. 4B. And then this ominous one, are there any other changes? We have 3 minutes. What I'm asking folks is at
My
least
outside
give us
laugh.
an idea in the next 2 minutes. If you have other changes that you would like to discuss regarding the renewable tool, please bring them up now so at least we can get an idea and cue something up.
That's not enough. We did it.
You really, Pizza has her hand raised. Pizza, go for it.
2 minutes. That's a lot of time for me. I think the past performance, it shows the future result. It is very, very important to see what they have done, and we will probably can guess what they will do. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Gita. Anybody else before I close this up for today? I think we have one more slide, but I just want to pause for a couple more seconds as everyone nervously awaits. We're gonna have extra work. All right, I don't see anything in the chat. No hands raised. So, okay, so hopefully that's all. And then go ahead and go to the next slide.
The problem with being a very engaged
Go
company.
to the end, Alex.
Very engaged company.
Wait, Mark, sorry. Where do you want me to go?
Just to the end, to the schedule.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay,
Sorry, I should have been more.
sorry.
See, we had all these.
Oh.
slides.
Yeah.
What were we thinking? All right, so we have 2 more meetings as a committee. We'll be here to get right in this.
Yeah. That's true.
In this room, both of the meetings, April 27th, next one. So, yeah, we're gonna hopefully, we're gonna aim for finishing up the renewal tool. And see if we can do both for renewal and renewal. That would be great. But thank you all so much for the rich discussion, super important topics we're covering. Thank you for bearing with us with the whole hybrid setup. Thank you to Amy J for supporting, Michelle, who's in a normal part of this committee, but she helped out today in person. But thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
We
Folks
did
in
it.
person, grab some chocolates and crackers.
Yeah. Woohoo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.